It's great to have you here on behalf of the American Schooner Association and the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar of Sea Stories. And we've got my great friend, Kathy Bergen Smith, joining us, who is the
Hello.
author of Deadly Gamble. Say hi, Kathy.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, everybody, before we get started, what I'm going to do is I am going to run a chat window in case anybody wants to talk. And I'm also going to run a Q&A, a question and answer with this. So if you would, at this point, help me out here, everybody. Type in your chat window the town you're connecting from, whether it's California or whether it's here. It would be great. There's somebody from Annapolis, Maryland, and just make sure everybody can see what they're going. Well, hello, Amy. Oh, my goodness. How about that? All my old friends from all over the place. Oh, this is exciting. What do you think there, Kathy?
This is great.
Can you see the chat window running?
Yeah,
Isn't that cool?
yeah, that is really cool.
Very cool. Oh, there's somebody from Matthews of all things. That's great. Hi, Ian. Oh, that's great, everybody. Okay, well, thank you for doing that. I can see that our chat window is working. What we're going to do today, everyone, we are going to run through Kathy's presentation. About halfway through, we'll take a very short 30-second break, and then we'll finish up. Hello, Bill England. And as we do, we're going to hear a lot about a very interesting story. This is really a two-part story. Am I right, Kathy?
That's right. That is
So
because
we've got the shipwreck, and then we have the aftermath. And for all of us, both are going to be very interesting because this is a shipwreck. It happened really pretty much in our backyard, North Beach, which is south of here, kind of 40 minutes south of Annapolis. And then legislation which led to our captain's licenses and our passenger loading licenses. So, Kathy, tell us a little bit about you. Catch me up. I haven't seen you since yesterday.
Well, I was working as a correspondent, East Coast correspondent for Workboat magazine for many years, like too many that to mention. And I was in Portsmouth, Virginia, covering the sinking of the tall ship Bounty when
Oh, I remember
first
that.
heard
Yeah.
about this. And the Bounty was a tall ship that went down in Superstorm Sandy, just off of Cape Hatteras.
Yeah.
And it led to the loss of the master and one of the crew members. And there was some question about the crew member's status because she was very much a greenhorn on the ship.
Mhm. Oh, ooh, come on now. Oh, don't lose this. Oh,
And is to the Levin, of course, of passengers for hire perishing on a sailing vessel. So I had never heard of it. I jotted it in my notes and kind of put it aside, and then came home and found out, like you said, Duncan, it took place just in my backyard. Essentially, I live in Galesville on the West River, and this was merely it's maybe 5 miles by water from here. So it was
very,
shocking to me that I'd never heard of it.
yeah. This is 1955, right?
Correct. But
Yeah.
it was also the greatest loss of life to this day on Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, Kathy, my daughter gave me your book for Christmas of 2022.
Mhm.
And then my son gave me a copy of your book in Christmas of 2023. So I've got one for each eyeball. Anyway, why don't you start up and tell us all about it? So share
All
your
right.
screen when you're ready.
I am going to
Look at we got people from all over the country. Roger,
turning for a sec.
go. Roger from Irvine, California. My goodness. And John Robinson. Hello there, John. Kathy and I have been working on the technical side of this, and I'm glad to see it's coming through.
It is coming through, I think,
That looks great, Kathy.
as long as I can get my video back on. I'm sorry
Mhm.
to say I may
Go.
I may be not being able to get my video back on at the
Well, that's
moment.
okay.
Yes, I shall. I will get it right back.
I don't doubt that for a minute. We're going to be just fine.
There
There
we
you
go. And
go. All right.
let's get the presentation going, and there we are.
Oh, it looks wonderful.
All
All
right.
right. Tell us what we're looking at, and away we go. And
All
ladies
right.
and
Well,
gentlemen, while we're going, if you
mhm.
all have any particular questions, type them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll address them a little bit later on. Okay, Kathy.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much to Duncan for inviting me to tell you this story tonight. And I have to say, I'm honored and a bit humbled when I consider the number of cumulative miles under the keel that I'm probably talking to at this moment.
Oh, get over it. Hey, Kathy, would you move your cursor off the picture?
Oh, yeah.
There you go. That's better. Okay.
Okay. But that being said, I think this particular group of individuals, I think you guys will find this to be an interesting story because it led to so many changes in legislation of inspection regimes and passenger vessels, especially the what we know today as the subchapter T and the subchapter K vessels. So first, a word about the photography you'll see in this presentation and in my book. Aubrey Bodine was a very famous Baltimore Sun photographer from the 30s up through the 60s and into the 70s. And
Yeah.
he was actually traveled on the Marvel both when it was a working vessel and after its conversion to passenger ship. So here is what you're looking at here is one of Bodine's shots of the rig.
Mhm.
These giant gaff rig sails, 90-foot mast, and they were really ran on a skeleton crew. Now let's take a look at our ship. So here's the Levin J Marvel in her working days. So she was built in 1898 in Bethel, Delaware. She was a three-masted schooner with no engine, great empty cargo hold down below. As you can see, no topsail and a donkey motor, just like a 3 horsepower, 2 horsepower donkey engine on deck to act as a capstan to assist in raising these enormous gaff rig sails up that 90-foot mast.
Now, you
So
may just take a moment to explain how the donkey works. It's a motor or engine at the front of the boat to which they lead the halyards to raise and lower the sails. Am I right about that?
except it's in the stern.
Oh, it's in the stern. How about that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's in a little doghouse on the stern.
Hmm.
And and so it acts just like a capstan in a sense, on another vessel. It's a motor, so they'll take like 3 turns around this thing and turn it on and it'll putt, putt, putt and pull that gaff.
That's right. There you go. It's a lot like a power winch.
Yeah, power winch, yes. And so she carried no topsail, so it was easy to pull, just get that gaff up. And so it was only a skeleton crew required. She was really built, all of these are called Chesapeake Ram schooners. They were mostly built up in Bethel, Delaware. She is 126. They went longer than that. Some of them were 136. But the controlling dimension on these was the beam, because at the time in the early 20th century, there were 4 locks in the C&D Canal.
No
And
way, really.
yes, and they were very narrow, like 30 feet, I think,
Mm.
maybe less. And so the schooners like the ram schooners that were wider had to go all the way around in order to go north to Philadelphia and New York.
God,
So these guys were built really to do one job, and that was to haul lumber from the Tidewater region of Virginia up to Philadelphia, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, and then come on the back haul through Baltimore and pick up fertilizer for the farms down there. That was really their job. And it was an incredibly successful class of schooner because they could sneak through the canal and cut a week off of the trip. They
yeah.
also, oddly, to many of you sailors will find this interesting, she's 126 feet. She had a centerboard.
Oh God.
So she had to because she needed to get up into these very shallow ports, in on the Tidewater, Virginia side and in North Carolina. So here, these were, as I say, a very successful class of schooner, but like all the coastwise trade in schooners, as trucking and the highway system developed, it just wasn't economically viable to keep
Yeah.
these going. So here's the beautiful Jenny D. Bell over in Salisbury. She was operated by her owner operator, who was an octogenarian, and his wife.
Oh
And
my,
their 5 dogs
no
lived
way.
on this schooner. This was the last registered. So if you go to the Merchant Marine Registry, this is the last American sailing cargo vessel registered.
I'll be darned.
Sailed until 1971 when their kids insisted that they move ashore.
How many gaffs can a set of dogs pull?
I think they had a young helper on there with them, but they lived on board. It was an
My
amazing
goodness.
family. So, but he just had to leave her to mold her in Salisbury. But the Levin J Marvel, who we saw at the Long Wharf in Baltimore a couple slides ago, had a second career. There was a guy who worked for the B&O Railroad through the war in the 1940s named Herman Nust. He's actually in the Sailing Hall of Fame because he was really had this innovative idea. He was a very, very good mechanic, and he ran the B&O's yard in Mount Clair Station for repairing locomotive engines,
How about,
and
yeah.
got promoted and sent to Elizabeth, New Jersey. And he kind of took a look around Elizabeth and decided, not so sure I want to pursue this career any further if this is a promotion. So he took a sabbatical of sorts, AKA quit, I think, and went north, and he took a schooner ride on a windjammer, which had already started. The windjammer fleet in Maine was already operating. The Grand Bank schooners, some of the fishing boats had been converted. And he took that ride and he said, wow, this would like work like 10 times better in the Chesapeake because we have a soft bottom, we have nice weather in the summer, reliably nice weather. And so he took his life savings and he bought the Levin Marvel and he converted her for passenger service. As you can see, he made little cabins. He cut portholes. He made sort of an interior, and then he like doubled out and made portholes for each of the cabins. He gave her a sink, built a deck.
Oh no. Oh, come on, internet. Here we go.
House saloon in the bow. And immediately,
Come on.
and he began marketing this. An Annapolitan by the name of Lester Trott, who was very well known. He was, I think, the longest running member of the Annapolis Yacht Club. His daughter recently told me. But he was also a brilliant ad man, and he created a suite of advertising for Herman Nust. And he mainly marketed this to sort of affluent post-war, we're talking just after World War II, 1946, people had a little jingle in their pocket and there weren't too many opportunities for a holiday. So, people were looking for family vacations. He marketed it as a dude cruise, a different sort of vacation. So you were invited to sort of indulge in a fantasy of being, in the age of sail, back out on the water, slowing down, and it was wildly successful. He added a second ship to his fleet. He bought the Edwin and Maude, and they ran 2-week cruises. Levin Marvel would do a 1-week cruise from Annapolis City Dock, and Edwin and Maude would go for 2 weeks down the bay all the way to Tangier, Smith Island, Portsmouth, back up. And they were very popular, $85 for a week.
Oh, goodness.
He advertised mainly in the New York market, in the New Yorker magazine, the New York Times. So a lot of people that were urban people that just wanted to unplug and take a vacation. Well, this went very well for him until in 53, he decided to retire and immediately sold Edwin and Maude north to one of the windjamming syndicates up in Maine, and they renamed her Victory Chimes.
A very well-known boat around here, yeah.
And she sailed until this summer. Now we'll come back and talk a little bit about her at the end, but Levin Marvel had no takers. So she moldered in Salisbury for about 1.5 years, jammed up in the weeds, pretty much out of the water, until this guy came along. This guy is John Meckling, who had a skipjack. He purchased a Deal Island waterman's skipjack and had sailed all over Chesapeake. He'd served in World War II in the Coast Guard, but kind of just bounced around afterwards. He never found his niche. But he saw the Marvel and he said, oh, if anybody could get this going again, it's me.
Yeah.
He bore a not so passing resemblance you might notice in this photograph to a young Ronald Reagan.
Oh, goodness.
A real raconteur, one of these guys that would talk your ear off, just a great, fun person. And he was right. He probably was the one guy that could get it back going. So he borrowed money from his cousin in Pennsylvania, and he bought it off of Nust and did minimal repairs. Now remember, this vessel has been jammed up in the weeds for over a year. It's wooden. We all know what happens. So he immediately starts running the ads again, and people recognize the Levin Marvel from a couple of years ago and immediately start making bookings. Contacts the Annapolis harbor master. He gets the old slip back. He says, I'll be over in end of June for pick up my first passengers. So he hires one of the old salts from Salisbury to bring the vessel down. They get 9 miles down the Wicomico, and the captain has to shove it up onto a sandbar.
Oh,
it's just sinking.
it's just sinking, yeah.
It's dry. Caulking is gone.
Yeah.
It took 6 hours for the Coast Guard to dewater it and tow it to the Whitehaven boatyard, which is where you see it pictured here the following day.
Yeah.
You can see if you look at it, it's in pretty rough shape.
Yeah.
The captain at this point, said, I think I'll pass on that trip to Annapolis.
I wonder why.
And so Meckling was left alone, but he had a yawl boat, as all of these big schooners did, and even the smaller skipjacks do to this day. And he had the motor launch, and he pushed it to Baltimore. Pushed it to Booz Brothers Shipyard, and he said, boys, I got passengers waiting in Annapolis. Caulk me from the waterline down, and I'll be back in the fall. So he did. And he was getting ready to leave when the Coast Guard captain of the port, Alfred Cabernagle, caught wind of the decrepit relic, the Levin Marvel.
That's a quote?
Yes.
Oh, it's nice. It's a good quote. I've used that on other boats myself.
Now, Cabernagle, who was the captain of the port, had come to the position by being the chief of marine inspections for the Chesapeake. So his job, his career essentially had been built upon like finding out why ships wrecked and sank and people got hurt. So
Yeah.
he was appalled that this thing was going out for passengers for hire. But Meckling argued absolutely correctly that their Coast Guard had no jurisdiction over him
And
because
that's because it was a private boat, right?
under 700 gross tons. Now, the Marvel came in well
Oh, no. Well, I'm sure she'll be back.
under that, maybe 100, 700 gross, a tall ship.
Oh, come on.
So are we having a technical problem?
We are having a little technical trouble. Well, you dropped out right when we were talking about how heavy she was. The 700, yeah.
Are we okay? Okay. Yeah. So under 700 gross tons, sailing vessels were not inspected. They were uninspected. So there was no inspection regime. There was no requirements for inspection. Coast Guard, in the meantime, had been lobbying very heavily on Capitol Hill for legislation to gain control over these vessels.
I love this picture. Just good God.
Here you see the Pelican, another small passenger vessel. This is a headboat out of Montauk, New York, 42 feet long. This is in 1951. There was a train that left Grand Central Station on Sunday morning called the Fisherman's Express. And for $1.50, you could take your fishing rod and your tackle box and get on these headboats in Montauk at the tip of Long Island. And on September 1st, in 1951, Pelican had 63 paying passengers on board, a 41-foot boat. And they got out, they ran into some swells. Everyone got jazzed up and moved to one side of the vessel, and she rolled.
Oh, God.
So 47 people lost their life that day, and still Coast Guard had no jurisdiction over these small passenger vessels. And it was mainly because Capitol Hill was loath to act, just like they are today.
Yeah.
The debates raged for years. So Meckling was free to set sail. Now, he had to sail. He wasn't allowed to use the yawl boat. He had to be a sailing vessel in order to be legal. And Coast Guard was always trying to catch him up. So he had a little sneaky trick he did. To get off the dock in Annapolis, he had to use the yawl boat, right? You got city dock downtown. He could not sail off of that.
No, of course not. Yeah, absolutely.
So he took his wife on board.
That was the secret weapon.
And so he would not collect the fares of the passengers until they were under sail.
Oh, look at that. Oh,
He'd
my
take
goodness.
them out. He would get them off the dock. He'd have the big, okay, everybody, heave ho. Everybody would get a chance to raise the sails. And once they got underway in the Severn, she'd go around and collect their fare, $85. And then one of the deckhands would run her back in the yawl boat.
Oh, my goodness.
And from there, it would be an exercise in serendipity.
Yeah.
Wherever the wind blew,
Yeah. We've all had exercises like that.
we're going to go. They might go south. This is them down in my hometown in the western
Oh, it looks like West River.
river in Gales. They would visit a lot of towns on the Eastern Shore.
Mm-hmm. Almost.
Yeah. See that, it was just real fun. He was just a great.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Kathy.
Uh,
Yeah.
you can come down on Sunday night.
Mm-hmm.
and sleep on the boat, and we'll set out on Monday and then spend the week going wherever we choose. And the first thing he did when they got there was send them to Mills across the street from City Dock.
Mills
There's a
Liquors, yeah.
very famous liquor store,
Yep.
and encouraged them to buy rum and whatever, just to, enjoy this vessel and enjoy a vacation on the bay, like everyone always does. Had a very successful season, never went back and got the rest of the caulking done. Did very little maintenance on the boat in the winter of 1954, but had a full book of reservations for the summer of 55. And he had two very good deckhands materialize that spring. Two kids that finished their junior year at the Severn School and did not have any desire to attend the Naval Academy. At that time, that was the de facto prep school for the Naval Academy. And these two kids, the one was Bill Verge, whose father was an admiral in the Navy, very experienced sailor. And the other guy was Steve Morton, and his father was Peter Morton, who was a well-known yacht racer who lived between Annapolis and Elizabeth City. And this kid had done a lot of offshore racing with his stepdad. So these two kids had prep school manners. They were great sailors. And
Yeah.
55 season just was shaped up to be a great season. On
Yeah.
top of it all, he had a fantastic cook, Ellery Pinckney. He had a
What's
crew.
not to like?
Right. And so it was a great season.
Yeah, you bet.
Up until the end, August 8th, the last voyage. These were a particularly interesting group of passengers. This is Bert Roberts, his wife, Frances. He was an up-and-coming psychiatrist at Yale University, very brilliant guy. And he and his wife arrived in Annapolis. They'd left their kids up in New Haven, first time since their honeymoon. And they had two toddler daughters. And Bert and his wife got there, and she was nervous about the ship. She thought the ship looked sketchy.
You wonder why.
And he said, well, let's take a walk and talk about it. And they had already met another couple that were on board, Louis and Mina Sobel, who Louis Sobel was a very famous social psychiatrist. And he had been the head of the Joint Committee during World War II and was really responsible for saving thousands of lives of children and orphans from Poland and Germany, and got them to the States. And so Bert looks at his wife and says, well, I mean, if Louis Sobel is on board, it's got to be safe. And you
He's a
think
psychiatrist. He knows boats.
Right, exactly. And Louis Sobel's daughter told me later, my dad would have never been on any kind of boat except an ocean liner. He knew nothing about boats. So
yeah, it's great. Yeah. So true of a lot of our passengers.
those are interesting, erudite group of they just really enjoy it.
Yeah.
He's our last. He was on board, and
Kathy, who are we looking at?
You get a lot, John, because this is John.
Kathy, your connection is pretty.
Ferguson, he was 16. Can you hear me now?
I can. It's dropping out from time to time, but we still have the gist of it. Let's keep going.
Are we there?
Yes.
There we are.
Well, I'll tell you.
But he kept a diary.
Oh, look at that. That's great. Dear Mother, we are stopped here for a day or so.
It says, it's not exactly the Queen Mary. But they were having a wonderful trip. So they set off on Monday and they went over behind Poplar Island. And they probably had crabs that night on board because they often would send one of the deckhands overboard with a net, and the chef would make an al fresco crab feast for
Oh,
them.
lovely.
And so the first night was probably a crab feast behind Poplar Island. And then the second day they went to Oxford. They went to the Robert Morris Inn after dinner, watched Dragnet on TV.
Oh, good fun.
And then they woke up in the morning and went over to Bellevue on the ferry. So very much like people might do today. I mean, it seems like a great trip. Now, this particular trip, hurricane warning flags were flying from Manasquan all the way. That's, North Jersey, all the way to Cape Hatteras, because Hurricane Connie was somewhere off of Florida, making her way north, but nobody knew when or where she'd come ashore. But no one was particularly concerned about that because they could always see land, and they felt that, they were like New Yorkers, like, oh, it must be safe. I've paid my money, like it's like riding the subway. And as John Ferguson wrote on that last day, what a day. It was his best day of the trip. He had convinced his dad to stay on board. And this is a very poignant entry because, of course, the next day he lost his dad and the ship went down. But it was a beautiful day on Thursday. Meckling had taken them to Cambridge for the final day, and they left Cambridge midday. They took a swim, and then they drifted south on a very light breeze. He was expecting the breeze to build, but the hurricane warning flags had been removed. It looked like Connie had gone out to sea, and the wind died down. So they took a very slow trip down the chop tank, and by evening, everybody was on deck just watching the stars. It was beautiful. Around 11 o'clock, Meckling turned off the radio and missed the last radio report, which would have told him that Connie had come ashore and was heading up the bay.
Oh,
So by the time they got into the main stem of the bay in the morning, around 4, the wind starts to build. They get out into the bay. By breakfast, they're encountering those gusty outer bands.
oh, yeah. Mm, mm, mm.
And hell breaks loose right around breakfast for these guys. And Mecklen comes and asks in the dining room sail. They reduce sail. So they're sailing just the mizzen at that point, and he's going to attempt to make a nap on the mouth of the chop tank, but cannot. He can't get there.
Mhm, mhm.
He can't to Poplar Island to get. He wanted to. He could not get into the West River, and so he blew. Essentially, at that point, he'd lost a little steerage from the jib.
Mhm.
He'd lost, and he was sailing before the wind Herring Bay. Somehow he was able to drop anchor in Herring Bay, about a mile and a half off of Fairhaven, for those of you that are local, at the mouth of Rockhold Creek. And they, did not heave a sigh of relief because during the crossing, so much water had been shipped aboard that the pumps were not keeping up. And really, it was very clear that she was foundering as soon as they anchored. The anchor started to drag, and they put a second anchor out, and that probably, in retrospect, caused the ship to just pull apart because she was so weakened. And everyone had donned their life jackets, but there was no real opportunity for an orderly evacuation. So people were flung into the water, and the first person reached shore at around like 4:30 p.m. She was a 26-year-old single woman who staggered ashore. And as you can imagine, the spectacle, there were two brothers down at their mother's beach cottage, as you would on a big storm. If you lived down there, you'd walk out every now and then and have a look around, see what's going on. And the waves were like 6 feet at this point, and she came to shore like just an apparition. And they rushed down, they got her up to the house, and she said, "I'm from the Levin Marvel. There are 27 of us out there fighting for our lives." And immediately, the town of North Beach just sprang into action. It was a shocking, how fast these guys got on the phone with each other. Everybody got down on the beach with their cars pointing because it was very difficult to see. And these people are in the water. And if they had drifted around the point there, they would have been back into the open bay. So to assist, people went out onto the rock jetty to see if they could help by keeping people from bashing up against there. People were on the beach. 6 people, including the captain, made it to a duck blind, and people on shore saw them waving a sou'wester. And the only boat that would ever be able to make it out, because it's very shallow down there, and the waves were very high. All of the fishing boats from Chesapeake Beach had attempted to go out and assist, but they were turned back. Coast Guard took hours to get down. The weather was just so bad. Now we're into full-on tropical storm and then / hurricane. These guys went out on look at this, 14-foot skiff with a small outboard, not once, not twice, but 3 times, about 200 yards in all, because they had to tack back and forth without sinking. And they got 6 people. These guys got the Carnegie Medal for Heroism after this. It was a dramatic rescue. There were 2 fellows from North Beach that were volunteer firemen. And it was just an unbelievable disaster. People in North Beach saw their volunteer firehouse turn into a morgue as all of these bodies began to wash ashore. This is our Steve Morton and one of the other passengers being rescued from the duck blind people. And it was shocking, really. The following day, nobody could believe what happened across the nation, partially because there were so many kind of luminaries on board, people like Sobel. There was a very prominent doctor from North Carolina on board. There was a family of 4 that was completely lost, like the entire family wiped out. A dentist and his wife and their 2 children from Brooklyn. It was such a shocking disaster that it was immediately picked up by all the newspapers. Of course, Capitol Hill happened in 1955. What was that? It was an exercise as far as the press saw it, and the rest of the country. Really a dramatic story, and it was very widely told. Immediately under pressure to vessel was out there, so they called their inquest immediately, returned and told their stories. First time Mecklin came back to Baltimore 1 week after a sinking, his story, and Lee referred to the Department of Justice, and very shortly thereafter indicted for manslaughter.
Oh,
So he was going to be held culpable for these deaths. And it would be a case of manslaughter by sailboat, really. And something that there was only one case that had precedence for this, which was a schooner captain in the late 1800s. One of his crew members had fallen overboard and he had neglected to go back and look for him. So he was charged with the same, it's a maritime charge. That it does amount to manslaughter, and it carries the same sort of sentences. He was also charged with negligence for taking an unseaworthy vessel to sea and causing the loss of life and property. So,
Kathy,
mhm,
let's take a short break here.
mhm.
We're going to hope your video feed stabilizes a little bit. I'm going to take share on my side for a moment,
Okay.
and we will be right back with you. This is a pitch to ask you to join us at the American Schooner Association. Founded in 1972, the American Schooner Association is dedicated to the history, preservation, and promotion of the schooner rig. You don't need to be a schooner owner to join the organization, just to be interested in these beautiful boats. As time marches forward, the role that schooners played in the history of our country is fading too. Your membership helps support educational programs and provides a base for preserving these vessels. So, join us. It's inexpensive, important, and we'd love to have you along. We'll see you at amschooner.net. We're back from station identification, and what a wreck
So,
we had.
and that is timely and important, because what happened after that was a widely covered trial, because everyone knew about the Levin Marvel and what happened. And he was indicted in the latter part of 1955, and trial was set for February. He had nothing. He was in Annapolis, in a house on Victor Parkway that he had helped build, because he was part of that project on the winter time. And he had lost his living. He had lost everything, basically. And a lawyer from Baltimore called him, and his name was Harry Katz. And Harry Katz was a real maverick for justice. He had just quit traffic court. He was a traffic court judge in Baltimore, and he was disgusted by the corruption between the police and the old boy network. A lot doesn't change, in Baltimore City, just like it doesn't on Capitol Hill. And he had quit, and he said, listen, he called Meckling out of the blue and he said, listen, I will defend you because you deserve defense, but you are in serious trouble, brother. And you're going to be spending the rest of your life in jail, probably, if you don't play your cards very well here and you don't have luck on your side. And so the trial went on. The first thing he did Katz was to decline a jury, because he had already been completely convicted in the court of public opinion. And luckily, he drew a very good judge in Dorsey Watkins. And Dorsey Watkins would later go on to be the chief of the Maryland Supreme Court. And he would also be the person that brokered the deal that got Spiro Agnew to resign from being the vice president during the Watergate affair. Now, you may not remember, but Spiro Agnew was being indicted in Baltimore County because he was completely crooked when he was the county executive there. And it was looking like maybe Richard Nixon would be impeached and removed from office, and then Spiro Agnew would be going to jail in Baltimore County, the vice president.
Thought that.
So luckily, Watkins was on the bench. So between Dorsey Watkins and Harry Katz, it was a pretty formidable team. And then throw into the mix James Langerall, who was one of the DOJ's top lawyers at the time. So it would have been a courtroom drama not to miss. Watching those guys go head to head, Langerall and Katz, and having Watkins really was a very active judge. He really wanted to know what was going on. And it was a fascinating trial, very widely covered every day. There were newspaper articles across the country about this. I'm not going to tell you what happens because you have to buy the book to find that out.
That's the way it works, isn't it?
Yeah. But there was a fallout, and it was this. The day that Meckling was testifying on his own defense, President Eisenhower signed the Small Vessel Passenger Safety Act of 1956. And that was what laid the groundwork for the six-pack license, for the inspection regimes, for all of these smaller vessels like the Pelican, the headboats, small ferries, and schooner. And so it was because of the Marvel that those laws were enacted. And it was because of the Marvel that we really can feel confident when we get on board. Now, I told you I'd come back to the Victory Chimes. I just want to give you a little update on that. And that is the fact that I spoke to the young master of the Victory Chimes as she was in Mystic Seaport being hauled for her inspection, Coast Guard inspection, built in 1900. She is on the main quarter. A Chesapeake ram schooner is on the main quarter, but beloved windjammer from the fleet in Rockland. And he said, I hope, I've got my fingers crossed, but we'll see what happens. And she was condemned this year. So if you want to see a Chesapeake ram schooner, you will have an opportunity if you go to New York, because apparently she's going to be a bar restaurant on Chelsea Piers.
Well, it's hard to sink a boat that's already in concrete.
Exactly. And so, that's my story about the Marvel. And if you want to read more, you can send me an email and I'll send you a book. Of course, you can always go on Amazon too.
Yeah, and of course, it's also put out by New Bay Books, so I'm sure you could concentrate and get a hold of them too.
If you have any questions, so are you there?
Yeah, I am here. Let's take a look here and see what we've got. We've got a lot of people have put in. We got a couple great shows. Thank you for that, everybody. And of course, I want to thank Rob Chichester for suggesting I mute my my microphone so we can get through this. Let's take a look at our questions here, Kathy.
Yes. Yeah.
Here's an interesting one. Most of us didn't know that the C&D Canal had locks. And so Amy Purvis, my friend up here, asks, why did the C&D Canal need locks and what has changed? Do you have any lead on?
Can you repeat that, Duncan? I can't hear you. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, that's fine. Whereas, why did the C&D Canal need locks? What has changed?
So the C&D Canal, when it was first built in 1829, was kind of a towpath canal, and there was a sea level change between the Chesapeake and the Delaware Bay, where it goes. But when they expanded the canal in 1929, they dug it deeper, so it could just be a sea level canal all the way across. No need for locks.
Got it. Got it. Um, Here's an interesting question. Is the horsepower in the yawl boat not it's the horsepower in the yawl boat, someone says, and not its length that counts. And I think that's probably true. Um, and Johnny Hines writes us, the continuing controversy in Fairhaven and surrounding is where the boat actually grounded and broke up. Fairhaven people swear it was off their beach, north of Holland Point. What are your thoughts, Kathy?
Well, I'll tell Johnny Hines that I believe if you go to Tri-State Marina in Tri-State Marine, you can buy a chart that our friend, the Maryland State archaeologist underwater Susan Langley, marked where the wreck actually is. And it is still marked, it's not a hazard to navigation, but it is still marked as a wreck. And it's about 1.5 miles if you look off of the mouth of Rockhold Creek and see the wreck marked there. That's the one. But as I say, if you go down to Tri-State, they even label it for you, Levin J Marvel.
Of course they do. It would be great to do that. Um, Brenda Reed, my friend down the street, asked, did the schooner have a lifeboat?
Nope. No, didn't need it.
And that was, of course, before all of our rules came in.
They had a yawl boat, but they lost it along the way.
Let's see. Oh, a lot of suggestions on how to stop our dropouts. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
What else is new? Here's a nice comment for you, Kathy. Fantastic. I love the way you've told the story. I just moved to Herring Bay area, Fairhaven and Tracy's Landing, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest of your story. Will you be sending will be sending you an yeah, she will be sending you an email. So there you go. You
Great.
lucky gal. And I actually first saw this presentation when you did it over at Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum in St. Michael's. That was done with a Zoom as well, and the connection was more stable than I have right now. Thank goodness for that. But it's been a very interesting thing, and it's a chance for us to all really see that what happens in real life affects our people farther down the road. One of the questions I ask whenever I am out with teaching students or teaching instructors, I always ask them, what is the thing that has sunk the most ships in history? And everybody hums around and thinks about this. And the answer to that, as I think I told you earlier, Kathy, was schedules. All right, Kathy, I'm going to give this back to you. Can you give us a little wrap up? And oh, here's one more from Bill England.
Okay.
Let's just read this.
Can you guys hear me?
It's patchy in and out. We're doing what we can. Bill England writes, I grew up just south of Chesapeake Beach, and when I was a kid, we swam in the bay all the time. And one day we uncovered a chain in the mud. My uncle, a larger-than-life character, said, it's the chain of Levin J Marvel. It turned out it was from a boat my dad had anchored off the shore there, but it made a lot of conversation. Don't you love it? Dads and their kids.
Oh, that's great.
Oh my goodness, Kathy, it's such a pleasure to catch up with you and
That's
loop
great.
in on this. Let's see now. I think that pretty much, oh good, John Pope has just put out the actual official location of that wreck, latitude and longitude, if you will check your chat screens. Kathy, I want to thank you. We're coming up on our closing time.
Oh,
And I really appreciate your being with me. Yeah. And let's try a stopping of your share right now. Stop sharing.
well, it's been great. It's
Yeah.
been great talking with you, Duncan. It's been a real honor.
Oh, it's very kind of you. I'm sorry we didn't have a more stable connection, but you all get an idea of what she's done. It's really a masterful bit of storytelling. And Kathy, for a little bit of an ego boost, just take a look at the chat as it goes along. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am going to close this out now. And I want to thank you all for
Thank you
coming
very
on.
much, Duncan, for tonight. It's been
Thank
great.
you, Kathy. It's been such a pleasure. And it's been great getting to know you. Good night, everybody.